12th meeting of the Milton Select Board. It is 7:02 and I would like to call us to order. Please join me and stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are going to proceed to public comment. And for Citizen Speak, we allot 21 total minutes of time. Individuals are asked to keep their remarks to 3 minutes or shorter. Mr. Milano will keep track of the time overall. I'll keep track of the 3-minute time. And I will give you a quick warning if you are, when you hit 2 minutes and 30 seconds. If you are speaking online from Zoom, I can tell you from personal experience, you will not hear us if we're trying to warn you, so maybe have a look at your Zoom screen because you'll be promoted as a panelist and we will start waving at you so that you know that your time is up. With that said, do we have anybody sign in? Do we have people in the audience who would like to speak? Okay. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome new members, and thanks to all for doing public service. My name is Margaret Carrolls. I live at 19 Gibbons Street, former director of the Milton Coalition. So I'm just going to give very, very brief background for the benefit of our new members about how we got to be here. We found out late last year that an article was being prepared for the February 2025 town meeting that would make changes to the bylaw that forbids the sale and consumption of alcohol on town-owned property. I consulted with some public health professionals here in town and made a presentation at town meeting outlining the impact on youth substance use. Long story short, the result was that alcohol sale and consumption is now allowed in town-owned buildings through the one-day permit process, but is still prohibited on town-owned land. We were told that this was not an acceptable outcome by some people in town, and that it would be coming back to town meeting. And indeed, the select board scheduled a public hearing at the April 8th select board meeting, and some colleagues and I presented there, or made some public comments there, outlining some of the best practices that we believed would adequately reduce the risk that comes from the public sale and consumption of alcohol, especially in outdoor spaces where there might be teens and children. And we then worked with some other people in town to include those in a draft of the bylaw that we shared with Mr. Milano after he shared a draft with us. We also shared it with some people in town we thought might give us some feedback, people who might be opposed to the changes that we were making, but we didn't really hear very much. So I'm here to say that we have an article ready, but we'd really like some more kind of going back and forth with people in town, because I don't want to get to the floor of town meeting and have this be I don't want to make up legislation on the floor of town meeting. I'd really like some more time to hear all voices and get some more input. So I'm asking that it be not in the May town meeting, but pushed off to a future town meeting. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the audience who wishes to join for Citizen Speak? I don't see anyone online with their hands up. All right, so that will conclude our Citizen Speak. We're going to do a little shuffling of the agenda. The first thing that we're going to do, though, is just quickly recognize our former select board members and do a quick introduction of our new select board members. I felt particularly for Ms. Musto, who served 3 years on this board, very diligently, attended every meeting. I don't think I was ever at a meeting that she wasn't at, and very thorough with her review of the minutes and materials. She worked very hard for this town, and I just wanted to make sure that we, as a board, collectively acknowledged the work that she did for Milton, that she continues to do on the Board of Health, and wish her the best in her future endeavors. And I would invite any of our members to say anything else about Ms. Musto, if they have thoughts.
What you said, thank you
Okay.
for her service. Yep, yep.
And I won't go to the same lengths for Ms. Bradley, because we knew that she was leaving, and we collectively cried over her departure a couple weeks ago. But of course, we do recognize her continued participation in much of the town's work, both through town meeting and as a volunteer. With that said, I would like to warmly welcome our two new select board members, Megan Hegarty and Winston Daly. Congratulations to you both on joining this board, and I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourselves. And Megan, maybe I'll start with you if you want to say a few
Sure.
words.
No, I'm excited to be here. My name's Megan Haggerty. I'm a resident at 7 Willoughby Road in Milton. I'm also a town meeting member in Precinct 2, and I'm honored to have the confidence of the voters of the town of Milton, and I promise I will work as hard as I possibly can for everybody in the town. Thanks.
Thank you.
You know, it's a little nerve-wracking being up here. Honestly, after
Welcome to
watching
the
all the
big
meetings,
show.
it's a very different, it's a very different kind of setup. So, Winston Daly, new member to the board, town meeting member in Precinct 2. I would first just like to thank all the voters for the huge turnout we had in this last election, from the override to all of our boards. It's incredibly impressive, and incredibly happy for the amount of civic engagement we have here in town. I thank them for trusting us with this role. Do not take it lightly. The power that we've been given and the ask for our leadership, and I hope to serve the town as best I can over the next 3 years. Thank you all.
Congrats again. And I think I would be remiss if I didn't point out, I believe, Mr. Daly, you're the first Black person elected to the select board. So I think that is
Well, damn. All right.
fantastic sign of progress in our town. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Not the first immigrant, unfortunately, we learned.
I know, it's
think.
Dennis,
yes.
right? Yeah, so I'll take number 2 on
But
that
yes, yeah. So again, congratulations to you both, and
Thank
welcome
you.
to the select
Thank
board. So I'm going to move, without objection, item 12, which is the proclamation declaring May as ALS Awareness Month in the town of Milton, up to number 4. And I would warmly welcome Heidi Vaughn to come up to the front and share a few words about May as ALS Awareness Month.
Thank you very much. I'm Heidi Vaughn. Am I supposed to give my address? Is that the
You don't have
normal
to.
procedure? Okay.
Since we invited you
I
up here.
was diagnosed with ALS 2 years ago when I was 43. And last May, I asked the select to recognize May as ALS Awareness Month, and they were gracious enough to do so. And I'm very grateful that this year I can be here just to speak a little bit and express my gratitude. Many people know ALS as Lou Gehrig's disease. And there's many ways that you can help our cause. You can be educated, you can fundraise, and you can advocate. And so I suggest if you're interested in any of that, ALS Association is a great place to start. We definitely still need all efforts going towards a cure. And in the meantime, helping all of us with ALS and our caregivers have a good quality of life. So thank you.
Thank you for your continued advocacy for ALS and for your presence here. So I've asked Mr. Cohane if he could read the proclamation.
Proclamation. Whereas amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, known by many as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a progressive fatal neurodegenerative disease that attacks nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord, making even the simplest movements, walking, speaking, and gesturing, difficult. And whereas approximately 5,000 people are diagnosed with ALS each year, with a new diagnosis every 90 minutes. And whereas ALS strikes people regardless of race, ethnicity, or social status, and currently has known cause, means of prevention, or care, making diagnosis difficult. And whereas Finding the causes and cure for ALS will prevent the disease from robbing hundreds of thousands of Americans of their dignity and lives. And whereas, on average, patients diagnosed with ALS only survive 2 to 5 years from the time of diagnosis. And whereas people who serve in the military are twice as likely to develop ALS, leading to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs recognizing ALS as a service-connected disease. And whereas ALS Awareness Month raises awareness of the dire circumstances faced by those with ALS, acknowledges the terrible impact this diagnosis has on affected individuals, their families, and the community, and recognizes the importance of continued research to eradicate this disease. Now, therefore, we, the Milton Select Board, do hereby proclaim the month of May as ALS Awareness Month in Milton, Mass. Together, we join ALS patients and advocates in spreading awareness and embracing hope that advances in science and medicine will soon lead to a deeper understanding of the disease, new treatments to enhance the quality of life, and a cure. Given this day of May 13th, 2025, signed by the Chair of the Select Board.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
I'll add too, I think Mr. Cohane and I both learned, neither of us were aware of the statistic around the veterans and their diagnosis rate.
Yeah.
So I think it's great when we do something like this, trying to educate folks, and we learn as we do that.
Yeah.
So thank you again.
You want it? Yeah.
Yeah, they're both fine. So next we're going to have a discussion about committee assignments. Very exciting. So I'm going to wait for Mr. Milano to come back here, but essentially at the start of our select board terms, we're going to review the committees that folks are on. In some cases, we may need to appoint new folks. In other cases, people may just want to continue in their roles. So, Mr. Milano, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Sure.
In terms of context.
So I think just in terms of the new finance committee piece, I don't have a recommendation or suggestion around that quite yet. It's been something we've been working on with our colleagues on the warrant committee and school committee. So I think if we could pause on the new warrant committee, select board, school committee, finance committee conversation. Obviously, I'm open to take any feedback that this board has at this time.
That's 5.
But maybe revisit, so item 5.
Oh, yeah.
This guy, yeah.
We can revisit that on the 27th once we have a little bit of opportunity to coordinate with the other folks. And then I think feeding into that is how the select board finance committee structure will move going forward. So perhaps those two we would put hold off for now until those conversations, and we come back with a proposal for this board to consider around that. Otherwise, nothing to add beyond what you mentioned, only that Mr. Wells, we did connect with him, and he's currently serving on the Capital Improvement Planning Committee and the Milton Landing Committee, and would like to continue to serve on those two committees. So I just wanted to report that back, given his absence.
Yes, he informed me of that as well. Thoughts or suggestions from anyone?
I think it's a good idea to unpack what the possibilities are for new updated finance committee membership and representation. It's something that I think is critical for us to navigate through the next 3 to 5 years as a town. So just looking forward to that discussion.
And I agree too. They're both tied together.
Yeah.
And then in terms of there's two finance committee essentially, right? We've got our own select board finance committee, which hasn't been in session in a bit, and then there's this idea of the new joint group. So we're waiting to hear back from the warrant committee.
We were trying to coordinate with the warrant committee and school committee to have an internal conversation about perspectives on it, to try to come back to this board with a proposal on how to structure that.
Okay.
And then work with this board. Obviously, we can talk about the other appointments and make those this evening, because nothing there is dependent
Okay, so, but we could still proceed with an appointment to our own finance committee.
Yes, my only point there was, depending on how we structure the new one, perhaps it's redundant to have ours or not, but that's up to this board in terms of how this board wants to proceed.
Are they kind of one and the same? I don't know. Or the people that serve on one should serve on the other. Just a thought.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I would think that as well, that whoever's on the select board finance committee would simply just join this new joint committee.
Yeah.
Historically, doesn't that finance committee have some overlap or some interactions with the other boards?
Yeah, we
Not
had
as
made it
official
a
capacity.
kind of a practice to meet occasionally with the school committee. The goal here obviously is to more formalize that. So I think I would agree that naturally that would overlap would make sense. The other thing I just wanted to mention, I've heard from multiple members of an interest in the finance committee, so one other item to discuss here would be whether it's a 2-member committee as it's been. It could conceivably be a 3-member committee. It means we just have to post the meeting slightly different and noting that the full select board could be present if all 3 members show up, but that is an option and something I wanted to flag is I know that's something that's come up to me, so I wanted to share that as well.
And I have enough to do, so I'm happy if you want to be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm not gonna. Whatever works.
I think it tends to be a little easier to have a 2-member finance committee just because the members can converse, although no, they really can't converse about finance committee stuff unless they're in open session. So it does, for them, it won't make a difference if it's a 2 or a 3-person
Correct. Once it's a
committee. And then traditionally, when we were a 3-member select board, was there just one person on the finance committee?
The board did not have subcommittees at that point because
Okay.
any combination of 2 members would have been a quorum of the entire board at that time.
Well, how do folks want to proceed? Do we want to talk about finance committee appointment now, and then that might help inform when we hear back from the warrant committee and the school board about, or do we want to postpone that?
I would rather that we spoke about it now.
Okay.
See
Okay.
interest, and then move forward from there. I would express that I have personal interest in being part of the finance committee. Also.
Okay.
I have personal interests too. I talked about it a lot.
Gotta keep those
Yeah.
promises. So the two, Winston and Megan are both, Mr. Daly and Ms. Haggerty are both interested. And John, you're okay to step down from it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. And then I think my understanding would be that they will convene as a finance committee and sort of appoint the chair between the two of them.
Correct.
At a future finance committee day. But I think having a finance committee up and running as quickly as possible, I think makes a lot of sense. So
Okay.
Especially because it hasn't been running.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do we have to vote on this?
We could. Why don't we go through them,
Okay.
and then I can read them off, and the board can vote like a package.
Great. So then our next committee is the Select Board Policy Committee. I'm currently on that, and Ms. Bradley was my partner on that work. We met, I think, a couple of times. We had some substantive discussions around basically just the policies and the workings of the Select Board. So I think it's a useful committee to have. I'm happy to maintain a presence on it, but I'm also happy to step aside if there's 2 members that want to take this on.
I wouldn't mind
Okay.
being on it. It's been one of my pet peeves. Has been the, just
No, I think it would
issues
be
and
great.
stuff. I'd love to get involved in it.
And so it's traditionally a 2-member board. Mr. Milano, am I
Correct.
missing anything for the
Yep.
policy?
Nope, you got it.
Any interest in the policy committee? I'm happy to keep it as a job of mine. Okay. Next up, we have the trustees of the Affordable Housing Trust. I'm currently serving in that capacity, but I have done it for 2 years. I'm happy to stand aside if somebody feels strongly about working on affordable housing. Don't all jump at once.
So
Yeah.
with
I'm happy to keep going with it. Or sorry, go ahead, Mr.
with the Affordable Housing Trust, and then is there overlap with that with the Town Farm Review? Or
So the town farm, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Milano, but the town farm review committee is a ad hoc committee that's supposed to expire at the end of June.
Correct.
And it was formed for the purposes of reviewing the proposals that were submitted for the RFP for the town farm. So
There's a representative from the Affordable Housing Trust on the Town Farm Review Committee, and there's a member of this board, the select board / trustees, who serves on that committee. So there's Tom Callahan from the Affordable Housing Trust is represented on the Town Farm Review Committee, and then Ms. Musto is represented from this group for that one.
Chair Zoll, since you've been on it 2 years, I certainly do have an interest in affordable housing. So
Yeah.
I would love to join that. If that's
all right, I'm happy to step aside. It is a great group of folks, and I think you will enjoy working with them very much. We know that Mr. Wells wishes to continue on the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Does anybody else wish to nominate themselves for that, or are we happy to continue to allow Mr. Wells his Capital and Planning Committee?
It's okay.
Okay, all right. For the Climate Action Planning Committee, we have designated Mr. Ron Israel.
His term is through June, and he's been working away with the committee. So no action that the board needs to take. at
Yeah,
this
his
time.
term's through
Okay.
June. Yeah, and my understanding is he's happy there. So, okay, no action there. Massachusetts Port Authority Community Advisory Committee, that is a mouthful, and it's vacant, maybe because it's a mouthful.
And I saw Katie Conlon during town meeting, and she reminded me of this appointment that the select board does make an appointment to this committee, primarily dealing with FAA and airplane related issues. The town has not been represented in a little while. So she's advocated that we do find an appointment, and it could be a select board member, it could be a resident, it could be potentially staff, depending on how that works. So no action necessarily required tonight unless a member has an interest in serving on it. But she just did remind of the urgency of appointing somebody to that committee.
So for that committee, I'm definitely not going to participate in it due to my state role. And I probably, if we had to vote on a member to nominate, I would recuse myself.
Okay. So any other thoughts from the board on this one? Okay. So my suggestion might be, since this is an issue that folks in town, some folks feel very strongly about, the airplane noise, that we may want to consider doing a appointment to this board and advertising for the position, so that we could consider a community member. Do we have an idea, Mr. Milano, about how often this group meets?
I believe it's quarterly. It's
Okay.
not a lot, but the work can be time consuming depending on the level of effort, and Milton would seek a decent level of effort from this representative.
Okay. Does that sound like a good path forward for this one? Let's leave it open for now and see if somebody wants to.
Yeah.
Okay. So MPIC, Ms. Musto was our select board member on there, so this is now a vacant position.
Is this another one of those committees that ends?
That's a good point. It is supposed to end in October,
Yeah.
but the select board has a seat on it up until October.
Okay.
And it may continue in some
Correct.
future
That is also
iteration as
true.
well.
They could come to town meeting to request it to continue.
What's that?
They could go to town meeting to request it
Okay.
to continue.
Okay.
So work through October. Anyone interested in that?
I
Ms. Haggerty?
actually would be interested in this.
Is that fine for the other members? Great. Milton Landing Committee. I know Mr. Wells is on this. We have two members that can join this. I will add that I spoke with Mr. Wells about this over the weekend, where he expressed his interest to continue to do this work. There will be some interesting work happening in this space because of cleanups needed in the Neponset River, which is one of the most polluted rivers in the country, both on the freshwater side and then ultimately on the saltwater side of the river. So is there anyone feel like taking this one up? You'd be interested in this?
Yeah.
Okay. Next, we have MPEG Board of Directors. Mr. Milano, do you want to give us a quick tour of MPEG?
Sure. So this is the nonprofit that oversees Milton Access TV. The select board has one of the, I believe, 5 board members is a select board member or designee. Ms. Musto had served in that role since she was elected to the board. So they meet, I believe, about monthly and help manage and oversee and administer Milton Access TV.
Well, I'm happy to pick that one up unless other folks are jumping at the bit. Okay. Pilot committee, I think we all know this is payment in lieu of taxes. That was Ms. Bradley. And this is Mr. Milano, do you want to tell us just a little bit about the pilot committee?
Sure. Since I've come to Milton, we've this committee was pretty active several years ago, and then as the pilot payments, particularly for Milton Academy, were increased, the committee was less active. We met, I think, once or twice since I've been here. Certainly a place to continue to revisit and continue to push, particularly with Milton Hospital, around pilot and ensure that Milton Academy and others continue to make payments to the town. But it's a place for more meetings and more work than has been currently going on.
And who else comprises that committee?
A few residents and a representative from the Board of Assessors.
I have interest in this committee, certainly.
All right. Is that okay for everybody? And we have 2 appointees to the school building committee, Mr. Cohane and Glenn Hoffman. My understanding from the school building committee is that they definitely want to keep Mr. Hoffman on board, given his length of tenure and expertise. How are folks feeling about this one?
I mean, if you want, I saw a volunteer, Michael Zulis volunteered. If you wanted to put him back, I'd be happy with that.
I'm happy to
Go on.
put Mr. Zulis on. I think that would be nice. I will say what I mentioned earlier is that if any other former select board members are interested in committees as being appointed to them, we'd be very happy to consider them.
Do we have to have a select board member? We
No,
know,
we
right?
can-
They
we
could be
can put 2
designees.
appointees.
They could be designees. I think the intention was to have a member who reports back, although now with the new fangled school building committee, I'm on there as an ex officio member,
I mean,
non-voting.
I'll stay, but whatever.
The only thing
Does it
else,
make sense for us to have 2 designees
That's a good point.
instead of,
Instead of somebody who's at the
yeah.
and we haven't necessarily advertised that we would post this position, so there haven't been other applications, but
Yeah.
people may not know it's an opportunity. So if maybe you would revisit in a couple of weeks, or if the board is thinking it should have a member on it, that's our route to go to.
What? Maybe should we revisit it?
Sure.
They're not meeting
Sure.
anytime soon, right?
No, it's
they
a-
just met last night.
Yep.
Okay.
So I don't think not between now and our next meeting.
Okay. Which is maybe next week. Okay.
And
So
everything-
we'll circle back to that one. Town Farm Review Committee, we spoke about this one a little earlier. My thinking on this one was that it was helpful to not have somebody who was either on MPIC or the trustees of the Affordable Housing Trust, because it provided a different perspective, because both the Affordable Housing Trust and MPIC were represented on this board.
Okay.
But I'm happy to take self-nominations or nominate someone. Again, this will be a committee that will meet. It will end in June, so it's not a very long time.
I should note procedurally, the select board should meet as the Governor Stoughton trustees to make that appointment.
You're correct,
So
Mr.
we
Mr.
should probably
Milano.
not take action, although maybe not even discuss it really.
Yes, we won't discuss that. That's a good reminder, though, for us to put a Governor Stoughton trustee agenda item on a future meeting.
Okay.
And finally, Youth Task Force. Mr. Cohane, you've been serving on that?
I've been guilty. I've been so busy that I really haven't. I'll try to give it better effort. I've been just everything else. There's so many hours in the day. I'm willing to stay and try to do better.
If anyone else is interested, maybe we'll open it up.
I would want to join the youth task force. As a citizen, I was a member when it first started.
Okay.
So I would love to find out where it is now.
Is that all right for you, Mr. Cohen?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll put Mr. Daly there. And that brings us to the end of our list. So Mr. Milano, do you want to read through them?
Sure. So I'll just read by last name. Select Board Finance Committee, Haggerty and Daly. Select Board Policy Committee, Zoll and Cohane. Affordable Housing Trust, Daly. Capital Improvement Planning Committee, Wells. Master Plan Implementation Committee, Haggerty. Milton Landing Committee, Wells and Cohane. MPEG Access Inc. Board of Directors, Zoll. Pilot Committee, Daly. No action on the School Building Committee, Youth Task Force, Daly. And a member can just make that as the motion.
And then I think we skipped over climate action, or did we?
We purposefully
action.
skipped
Oh,
over
we
that.
did.
Yeah.
Okay, because we're on hold.
Yeah.
Okay.
His appointment goes through the end of June.
Okay.
Does anybody wish to make the motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept these appointees.
Anyone want a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on this one? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, unanimous. All right, let's go to our next agenda item. Let's just cover up my. We have discussion, update approval, special town meeting, June 16th, 2025, warrant articles. Mr. Milano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we listed the warrant articles at the bottom of the agenda. I did print hard copies in case anybody wanted to see those, and they were in the packet published. And I know we've had a couple conversations about these before town meeting last week. But I just want to preface this with, one kind of overarching comment where our turnaround time here is very limited. The calendar and the demands on the warrant committee have been high between the February special, the May annual, and obviously this June special. And the intention of the June special town meeting was the MBTA communities zoning stuff. So I think in thinking about what articles ultimately we do move forward, it might be helpful to keep that in mind, and things that maybe we can not bring forward at this time, maybe it might make sense to do so. So the first one on the list is to appropriate additional funds to the reserve fund. This was $300,000 that was set aside in case the school department needed additional funding for the fiscal year 25 budget. We did appropriate $700,000 to the reserve fund at the annual town meeting. That leaves $300,000 in free cash unappropriated. If we don't appropriate it, it'll close out at the end of the year and contribute to next year's free cash. If we appropriate it to the reserve fund, it's available to be spent by the school department if necessary, or other boards and departments if they need to before the end of this fiscal year. If it's not spent, it'll close out to free cash and contribute to next year's free cash. So mechanically, there's not a big difference with appropriating it or not, but by appropriating it, we have it available if necessary for the warrant committee to recommend transfers out of it in accordance with what would be extraordinary unanticipated costs. So my recommendation is that we do bring this to the town meeting, that we appropriate this last free cash into the reserve fund. And I would characterize this as more of a time-sensitive article because the town meeting would need to act on any appropriations of this nature prior to June 30th. So that's the first one.
Any questions on that from Mr. Milano? Okay. Light trespass.
Thank you. Light trespass, so as we've been back and forth on this several times between warrant committee and town meeting, what I provided in the packet is the third version that former member Aaron Bradley had presented at town meeting and submitted to the moderator and others as an amendment. I did distribute kind of late today some further requests or suggested changes for consideration from a resident, but I think where it was left was we would try to get it back, but I just want to defer to this body on that in terms of what version and what to bring forward.
Any thoughts?
I just feel like I'd like to get it right, but if there's a rush, okay, but if there's not a rush, just at the last town meeting, things came up that were, I think people got confused about a lot of things and in the end voted for things that they really weren't sure they were, but that's just my 2 cents. to just put it off until we get it right.
Okay.
It has huge implications. But if there's some, I don't know everything, and if there's some urgency to it, then we could put it on. But just
Other thoughts?
Are there major substantive changes being proposed?
The changes we got late this afternoon were, I didn't have a lot of time to sit with them, so I can't really speak to them in depth, but
My understanding, it looked more like it was
cleanup
cleanup,
and
yeah,
improvements.
than anything else.
I can pull it up and share it if it's helpful to the conversation.
On the one hand, I appreciate wanting to be ready whenever we bring articles to town meeting, because it's been a problem in the past. People have been confused, but also at the same time as well, we have to have, products that are complete. Or at a certain point, we have to sort of end the debate.
Yeah.
My understanding is this is the version that we never got to. All the town meeting members did not get this version in the last town meeting, right? Because the green sheets weren't completed. So
Correct.
I'm guessing that these are the final edits, and this is the final version that Member Bradley wanted to see at town meeting. So if this is this version, we're not going to have any more corrections. I would be all for moving it forward and putting it to the folks at town meeting so they can make a decision. So we never got to this version in the last one.
Correct.
Other thoughts? I tend to agree with Mr. Daly. I think, we all witnessed, well, particularly Mr. Cohen and I did with Member Bradley.
Turn this off. Does that make
It's fine. I had a chance to look at the cleanup language briefly as well. We had a public hearing on this one. We had a couple of folks, including some Milton Academy students actually, that spoke really in favor of this. We had nobody speaking against it, and I know that there are, I think there are some questions around how does this work. I think that would be a good discussion to have on the floor of town meeting. But my inclination is to put it on the warrant. But I think, so Mr. Milano, if we voted to put it on the warrant now, we're going to have to, my guess is we're going to have to reopen the warrant next Tuesday.
Correct.
So,
Potentially, right, yes.
yeah. So I think given that we would have a week to review the language again, my suggestion would be that we move it forward and everybody have a look at it. And then if people have substantive problems with it, let's discuss next week again. And then if we decide that we need to take it off, we can take it off.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Do you need to vote on that?
No, I can distribute the revised version again, just and include it ahead of next week's meeting packet as well.
Okay. Then accept MGL Chapter 40, Section 57, and amend the general bylaws to allow denial or revocation of licenses, permits for failure to pay municipal taxes or charges. And I know that you regaled us with this one a little bit earlier, Mr. Milano. But
Sure. In summary, this would allow the town to deny or revoke licenses or permits for failure to pay primarily property taxes or other municipal charges. This is not particularly time sensitive. It's not like we have chronic problems. There are a few handful of problems in terms of failure to pay taxes, but it would not be critical to have it done in June rather than in the fall, if that's a factor in terms of determining whether to put it forward. The article is pretty much a copy and paste of the statute. You have to create a new bylaw, accept the statute. The state law specifies the exact language that the article must have, so it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of editing we really can do other than to specify the amount of time that must elapse for the failure to pay taxes before we would start denying licenses or permits. But again, I wouldn't call it as a critical action item for June if there's interest in reducing the workload for June.
How is Milton an outlier in having not adopted this yet, or are there many other municipalities across the state that have adopted this?
It's a good question. I don't have a good answer on that. I would say that there's been a trend for more communities to adopt it and get it on the books recently.
Yeah.
It's how it came to our attention, the treasurer's attention.
Okay.
But I would say more often than not, they have them. But there are other penalties for failure to pay taxes, whether it's charging of interest, moving to a foreclosure, and other ways. So this would just be one more tool that we would have to entice.
Is there a lot of evidence of the efficacy of adoption of this, or like have in the community of municipalities have towns cited it having a big impact on collections?
Having been in a community where it was in place before, but it was a much more commercial, so it was more about maybe small business owners and small landlords who are problematic.
Yeah.
And, 99% of our taxes are paid on an annual basis. So we're talking in terms of Milton, we're talking about a small group or a small pool of people who aren't up to date. It was helpful for us in those instances in my prior community, but I can't speak to more direct experience on that.
Okay.
On number 5, the exceptions. You said
Yeah.
this is general state language. Most of
Yes,
the
correct.
article. With the section, these sections do not apply to following licenses and permits. Do you know the thinking around E, licenses for clubs and associations dispensing food or beverage? Why are they exempted from this?
That's just the state law that we're not allowed to. We're required to exempt them under the state law. I can't speak to the rationale or whatever what the legislators wrote when they created it, but that's in there. It's lifted directly from the state law.
And with this, most of our taxes being paid, again, I'm just messing this up. I'm new.
It happened to me so many times.
So with, as you said, most of our taxes being paid annually, how would this 6-month period impact us?
So it would be easier to process this on an annual basis, but if a property owner has gone 6 months without payment and then does a big renovation to their house, I think that's something we'd want to try to prevent from happening in those kinds of occasions. And so a 6-month lag, we felt and the treasurer felt was a decent amount of time in order to get up to date. And I also note that the law and the bylaw that we would have to put on our books does specifically require that we offer payment plans as an alternative, not demand full payment right up front, but offer payment plans as an alternative to get the denial lifted.
Thank you.
Mr. Cohen, any thoughts?
I see this as Nick's. No, your item, and if you're comfortable with it.
And how does our treasurer feel about this one?
Oh yeah, it's not my item. It was brought to me.
Okay.
She flagged it as a
I thought it was.
with a number of other items.
Okay.
So Joanna deserves the credit for flagging it and bringing it to our attention.
So I'm of two minds about this. On the one, I totally understand the desire to limit the amount of work being done at the June special. On the other, if it's a pretty straightforward process that helps the town in terms of a revenue perspective, and it's a pretty easy win. It's kind of nice to have those articles at town meeting that are quick yeses. Makes us feel very productive, I can say, as a town meeting member. But I'm open to board suggestions on this if we would want to defer it or if we want to keep it on here.
I would want to move it forward if it's a light lift. It'll help our treasurer in any collections that may come up and see any benefit in denying it or delaying it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, now more than ever, we need every tool in the toolbox.
And I like keeping our treasurer happy, so.
There you go. There you go.
So let's maybe keep it on this.
Okay.
The acceptance of property tax exemptions for veterans and the elderly.
Sure. There are 3 clauses, so let me just pull it up here. Sorry, so I have it in front of me. Give me one moment. General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5 outlines all the tax exemptions. And some of them are statutory, some of them, which means all cities and towns are required to offer. Others are local acceptances where the town meeting must accept them. In reviewing the list of exemptions that we've accepted or not accepted or that are applicable in Milton or aren't, we identified 3 that that apply annual cost of living adjustments based on the consumer price index to 3 exemptions that are offered in Milton, are required to be offered in all cities and towns. The first is for the elderly, which is a $500 exemption. It's clause 41. The second is to veterans, which is clause 22 through 22F, which is varying levels of exemptions based on service-connected disabilities in military service. And third, for the blind and other impaired individuals. So these exemptions are already required to be offered in Milton, but they're set at a fixed amount, and that amount does not change. What this acceptance would say, okay, for those various exemptions, they're going to be increased annually by the consumer price index and set by the Department of Revenue. So it'll allow for an annual adjustment to these rather than having them stay fixed forever. As we know, we're increasing property taxes by the limits of Prop 2.5, which says that the levy will go up by 2.5%, but really tax bills are going up closer to 3 to 3.5% annually. These exemptions have stayed static until and unless they're adjusted by the legislature, really, or through this mechanism to allow for an annual adjustment under the COLA. So that's our recommendation at this time, to allow those exemptions to float essentially annually.
Questions? I do have one, Mr. Milana. So is it specifically you tie it to CPI? I'm just wondering about, like, with Prop 2.5, has anybody ever thought about just tying it to the 2.5% increase?
I'm sure, but the state law specifies at how it would be spelled out. So it's set by the Department of Revenue, which is based on the consumer price index.
Okay, I had a feeling that there was a rule there. But it seems pretty straightforward to me. And is this one time sensitive given the fiscal year?
Yes. If the town accepts it by June 30th, it would be in effect for fiscal year 26.
So then it makes sense to me to keep it on the warrant. I see a lot of nodding here, so I think we're okay with that one. Is that both of those, I guess? Property tax exemptions and then the MGL's Chapter 60, Section 3D? Oh, no, that's the voluntary donations.
This is a little bit different. This would allow us to put on tax bills a voluntary donation to an elderly and disabled taxation fund. So taxpayers would have that option if they want to take advantage of it. The money would be held by the town under the control of a new committee that would have to be set up in accordance with this statute, which is the chair of the Board of Assessors, the treasurer, collector, and then 3 residents. And that committee would then determine on how to disperse the funding and what the rules and the program requirements would be. We found that this is, a couple $20,000, maybe $30,000 a year in some other comparable communities. It's not going to be, based on those experiences, a significant amount, but it's something, and it's voluntary. And if it's accepted by June 30th, then it could be in place for next year's tax bills, depending on the printing cycle.
Any thoughts about this one?
I think it's a great idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's keep it on there. The alcohol on town property.
Correct. As we heard from Margaret, there are 2 versions in your packet. The first one is the one that I drafted based on some conversations with the select board. The second one was redrafted and submitted to address some concerns raised. I think there are some additional requirements around advertising, the type of cups, and food requirements. And the main, or one of the bigger differences between the 2 is that as edited, it would require that alcohol service and consumption take place in a designated location at an event. that's only 21 plus, so it'd have to be, a separate area. That is one of the differences, and then there are some additional requirements in the second version. So we haven't had a lot of an opportunity for dialogue. The turnaround time, as we've been talking about between April and now, and the town meeting has been challenging on that front. So I'm really up to the board in terms of the steps we want to take to resolve this and trying to get something at town meeting.
Thoughts from members?
I know our absent board member wants this to go through, but I've always advocated for let's get these right. So I can't vary here. So that's my comment.
Yeah, I mean, those sound like there's some pretty substantive differences in the drafts. Other than just trying to correct for the February, article in confusion, is there a reason that we would definitely want this on the June warrant? Like, are we under time pressure to do this?
Well, I would say no, in that, there's nobody lined up.
Is
with a
there
keg
something
outside of
planned that our local
council meeting.
businesses, like, is somebody looking to have like a Oktoberfest
So
or
my
something?
understanding is, sorry, go ahead, Mr.
The
Clay.
Chamber of Commerce was kind of pushing for this to be
yes.
solved quickly
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of their events,
Yeah, and were they planning on something? Just
Specific event, I don't know.
okay.
So the two examples that were discussed, and I'll mention again, and those have been questioned a bit, I think, would be the Halloween event in Manning Park in East Milton, the tree lighting. So I think tree lighting time frame probably still actionable, whether it's a fall town meeting or not. The other event that the chamber worked on last year was a welcome back event in September. So the first Friday, I think after Labor Day, they held an event. So I think those are more fall time frame, but those are examples of events where I could see this request being made.
And Mr. Milano, in terms of the timing of this, though, if it goes to a June town meeting and passes, we still have to wait on the AG to sign off on that. Is that correct?
Correct. We would need to get a certified copy submitted to the Attorney General's office. They have 90 days to review. So whether, that would push us to at least, let's say, October before we would hear back based on the turnaround time for something like that. So that's a good point in terms of the timeline. It might be tricky anyway.
Any other thoughts on this one?
No, I mean, I think that's just the timeline is helpful just to understand the impact of that.
Although, to your point, if we're going to chat again next week or meet again next week, and there's a little bit of work that happens between now and then, and people feel comfortable with it moving forward, we could revisit it then. I'll just note that the more that waits till next week, the more likely we're going to have a lot of green sheets at town meeting. I think that's going to be unavoidable at this point in terms of warrant committee recommendations not being printed in the warrant, but being provided separately on the website and at town meeting itself. Just with the turnaround, that's going to be something anyway, and we're probably racking up the number of articles that will be the case for. The warrant does need to go to print really by midweek next week with the final articles and as many recommendations and comments from the warrant committee we have. The warrant needs to be in mailboxes for June 2nd, which is 14 days before June 16th.
So my thinking on this one, I tend to agree with Mr. Cohane on this one. Like, this is one that we really want to make sure that we get right. I think with the lighting bylaw, we had a couple of positive comments. Those of you who, I know Mr. Cohane was there for the Milton-wide discussion. There was definitely a lot of discussion and feedback, and I think that was the absolutely right step. But I do feel like there's room for a little bit more discussion, and it's hard for me that the Halloween stroll is like just for kids. But I understand that you want to make it for adults too. I just feel like if you're in East Milton, there are plenty of places to get a drink if you feel like that's what you need. So my inclination on this is if we're not going to hear back from the AG until October anyways, I don't know how much outdoor drinking we want to do over the winter, but I think this one could wait till the fall. I also tend to think that this one will have a lot of discussion on town meeting floor, and then if we're doing that plus the green sheets, I think it's just going to make it very confusing.
I agree. I think clarity for this particular article, given what happened the first time we went through and the varying confusion and folks not sure what it all meant, this is definitely one that we should get absolutely right before we bring it before town meeting. So if it's another week or next time we meet, I think it's valuable that we table it.
Yeah.
In the interest of full disclosure, I don't drink. I should recluse myself.
Neither do I. So, yeah.
Well, I'm not drinking right now, so.
Well, I think there's no, if it's probably not possible to implement by October anyway, then what's the harm? You know.
Yeah, I think let's get it right, and then next summer can be.
And we got a full slate.
Yeah.
Too. That's another big.
Yeah. The last article is looming in this discussion. Mr. Milano, the East Milton Overlay District.
Thank you. The planning board submitted this article. They had really targeted the annual town meeting. We're ready for the annual town meeting, but we encouraged them to hold off and try to strip any other article that was not budget related as much as possible from that annual town meeting. So they've submitted it, requested this to move forward. They've had years of work on this overlay with their consultant, MAPC. They had a forum as recently as, I want to say March, in East Milton, just to present the final version. The zoning language, the zoning map is in your packet. So I think their request and preference is for this to move forward to June. And just to describe the zoning, it's 3 stories of mixed use in East Milton on specific parcels adjacent to Adams and Granite in kind of a limited geographical area.
Is mandatory mixed use too.
Yes, correct.
Any thoughts from the members?
No, I agree moving forward. Having watched the forum and looking at what we have here in the warrant, our information packets, I think this is a great article.
Yep, I agree.
And Nick had brought it to my attention today that I'm within a certain distance from this, so I have to recluse myself from
Okay.
this.
Fun, yeah.
But we're not voting on it here. We're just including it in the. So you can
I'm
recuse
not sure.
yourself from
Okay,
the comments,
later.
I think.
Okay,
But yeah.
okay.
But yes,
But just so you know.
we'll include it in the
So we know.
in the warrant. Floodplain.
The floodplain, this one is actually time sensitive as we have to update our language around the floodplain by, I want to say, it's a July deadline, July 8th, I believe. So FEMA is notifying everybody in Massachusetts with new flood maps. So it's more of a housekeeping item where we're updating some definitions and other requirements within the zoning to account for the latest flood maps from FEMA. This has been reviewed and already submitted by the planning board. Already met with the warrant committee to go over it. So just request that it continue forward through the process here.
Anybody see a reason why not to allow it?
I think this makes a lot of sense.
Okay. And then MBTA Communities Multifamily Overlay.
Yes. So we have
a separate item on our agenda for this
Correct.
one. Do you want to
that.
bounce that to the? Do you want to bounce it to that one, or?
It doesn't matter. I'd just say in terms of articles specifically, I think the conversation is going to just kind of talk about MBTA communities big picture. The articles, we do have articles submitted. Planning board's meeting currently. I'm aware they may be talking about potentially changes or final edits or withdrawal of some of the articles, so I can provide an update to the select board as when that happens. But I think potentially for the discussion tonight, it's helpful to steer clear of the articles as they're still being potentially
We don't have
edited,
the articles,
worked on. We don't
you know.
officially have them quite yet.
Okay, so let's defer the discussion on the articles themselves. And then maybe what we can do is move to item number 8, which is MBTA Communities Act status and next step.
Where'd you like?
Well, so there's a couple of items, just a couple of quick questions that I have for you, Mr.
Sure.
Milano. It would be, I think, helpful for folks. My understanding, I know Mr. Cohane and I both were interested in attending the meeting with HLC that happened a couple weeks ago, but we were unable to. My understanding of that meeting is that at the beginning and the end, the HLC confirmed that we are a rapid transit community and that all of their commentary would be reflective of that status. Is that correct?
Yes, HLC addressed it at the outset, just basically saying, as a reminder that they have the regulations classify Milton as a rapid transit community, and their comments and discussion were going to be more technical responses to the zoning. And I'll just note that the conversation from there was knee deep in zoning and technical issues. It was a very helpful conversation on some of the items that the planning board's been wrestling with through this process in terms of some district locations, district sizes, mandatory mixed use, but it was HLC did reiterate that and then moved on to the technical conversation in terms of the zoning, more detailed zoning questions that the town had.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to jump in. Usually I know chairs like to speak last. I'm so used to just jumping ahead, so I'm jumping ahead. I'll get better at this. Just one more quick question though. My understanding from watching the planning board meeting, I admittedly did not watch all of it, but I watched some parts of it, is that the planning board had voted to send a 10% plan and a 25% plan to town meeting for this June. That's which I was delighted about, but that may not be the case any longer. Is that what
So yes, on Thursday, May 8th, they did so vote. They had the 10% plan, the adjacent community plan, has been kind of fully prepared for a while now. The other 25% plan and rapid transit community plan had been finalized to an extent on Thursday night, and the planning board did vote to submit it. However, there were tweaks being made in terms of the district parameters, in terms of FAR, floor area ratio, units per acre, and other things that may result in some edits between what they saw Thursday and what they were being sent tonight. And I did hear from the chair who mentioned that the board may discuss whether to submit the 25% plan at all or not. So that discussion I expect to be taking place currently. So there may more to come, I guess is the best way to put it. And we'll have to see what the planning board's action is this evening.
Are we going to have a runner come through the door to tell us what's
Checking
happening?
the phone. So.
So thoughts from folks. Mr. Cohane.
I mean, everybody knows where I stand. I feel like a 10% plan is right for us. I feel like we're fairly classified. I worry about future impacts, and I would be remiss not to say so. That's my feeling on it. I just feel like we've been unfairly classified. And I know we talk about the law and everything, but there are even challenges to it, both from the unfunded mandate and Senator Driscoll's comments and the fairness of it and the accuracy of it. That's my feeling. I feel it's a fair plan for us. And he also made me a little more scared when I heard him mention that, once we get on this status level in the future as things go, we grow from this, not from 10%. We grow from 25. So I just think it's been mentioned before, and I've mentioned it before, maybe not as drastically as the expressway coming through Milton, but I do feel it will have that kind of impact. That's my feeling. Anyway.
Other members, yeah. Ms. Haggard.
So I have a lot of questions.
This is the time to ask them.
So at the top of my mind right now is, if we have regs that have been promulgated that have us as a rapid transit community, what is our actual pathway to having a lower designation, right? So, I'm confused about what that looks like, what conversations have actually been had. I myself during the campaign was definitely a proponent for negotiation, but it seems like I can't tell if that period of negotiation is actually still open. So that's a question. And then two, if we have, if we still do have the opportunity to negotiate the designation, what's the pathway or what's the vehicle? Because to me, just in my experience with state regs, it seems that since this is written, I think in page 18 of that document, it says very clearly that we are a rapid transit community, therefore we're 25%. We would, the housing and livable communities would then have to reopen the entire regs process. And what would then be the timeline for that to happen? Has anyone agreed to that, to get us to 10%? Otherwise I don't understand how this would actually happen. For me personally, like I don't have, there's not like a number in my mind. Like I'm not dogmatic about 25% or 10%. Like I want us to get the best deal for Milton and also be in compliance with the law, because we have a pretty tricky fiscal state that we're in right now that we can't we can't afford to lose grant funds. And then, the other question that I have is, how can the planning board approve a 25% plan and take it back? This whole process is feeling very chaotic to me. And, I would like for us to get together as leaders and bring some order to it. Those are my thoughts.
Are those rhetorical, or would you like?
In
terms of the,
that's my understanding, and I just don't know if there's something I don't understand.
in terms of the negotiations, and again, Mr. Milano, you can jump in and correct me, or Mr. Cohen, or anybody else. We have not had in 2023 in the fall. We sent, I think, 2 letters from the select board to HLC, asking both about the status of Milton as a rapid transit community as related to the trolley, and I think it was just specifically related to the trolley. And we were told, and my feeling about the trolley has always been that it's been historically underinvested in because it serves a largely Black and brown community, and it's shameful the state that the trolley is in, and plenty of people use it to commute into town. So many of whom are not in Milton, but they're residents of Mattapan or Dorchester, but they nevertheless still depend upon it. I also feel strongly that Milton has a role to play in solving the regional housing crisis. Since those 2 letters came back and we received basically were told no on that, then we had our town meeting, referendum, lawsuit. There has not been any substantive discussion about the classification. There hasn't been any discussion other than HLC reconfirming that we're a rapid transit. So there hasn't been any debate or discussion about that with HLC from the town of Milton.
No, the other point in terms of that timeline I would add is that after the court decision came out at the SJC level, when HLC instituted the emergency regulations, this board submitted public comments, making the argument around the classification kind of first and foremost. And that was, a reopening and a new opportunity for regulations to be changed between the time when the emergency ones were put in place and the 90 days before the final ones are promulgated. Excuse me. So our public comment, while it wasn't answered necessarily by HLC, but we did submit it, and the regulations were essentially unchanged from emergency to final in terms of how they addressed Milton specifically.
And so, Megan, I think that your question, I'm sorry, Ms. Hegarty, your question, I will endeavor to be more formal. I think your question about the actual pathway to negotiation, I think, is the real key point here. We have today, it's the 13th of May. Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad, by the way. It's their anniversary. We have a town meeting in essentially almost exactly a month, right? I think we start on the 14th, is that right?
16th.
16th, sorry. I don't know why the 14th keeps popping in my head. So we have a little over a month. I share your question also about the 25% plan. To me, it's if a board votes in a particular way, it's very. I don't understand how you can, outside of an open meeting, decide that the board has done the wrong thing unless you've talked to a majority of the members of the board, which would have been a violation of open meeting laws. That said, I think it would make sense for the select board, rather than the planning board, to go to HLC to have a discussion, whether it's with the secretary or his representative, specifically around the status of the trolley in our status. And I know that lots of folks would like to be in that meeting. My suggestion is that the chair and the vice chair would be the two members that would go and have that discussion. I think, again, it's no surprise to Mr. Cohane that he and I are on different sides of this. I think it would be helpful for both of us. We wear the same shirt. We really work on being coordinated. But I think it would be helpful for both you and I to be in the room and then report back out both to this board and as well as to the broader Milton community. And so if you're okay with that, Mr. Kane, and if Mr. Daly and Ms. Hegarty are okay with that.
Yeah, I have a few questions.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So,
Wasn't trying to put a final stamp.
No, just trying to get up to speed on where we are. So when was the last select board, planning board meeting? Have we had one of those two bodies? Whether it's public or an executive session or
not a joint public meeting since October of 22 on a different matter. We have not had a joint meeting on this issue.
So that's a concern that I have immediately around what the planning board is working on, what we've got here in front of us, whether we're voting it on warrant or another, because there are questions that I think as a board we have to ask the planning board, right? Other than us just watching their meetings and trying to understand the thinking of where these things are, because 25% or 10%, I have a lot of questions about the layout and what was chosen, why things were chosen. You know, we can't continue using UTIL's time, but regardless of whether 25% or 10%, I'll get to that in a second, we have to have time to bring this to the community, right? The community hasn't had input, right? I'm encouraged by watching the East Milton overlay and seeing folks in East Milton that got to go in, review over time. That started in 2021. It took that many years and had that many meetings of people asking questions and having input. And for us to be here 3 years and those two bodies haven't met, I think is concerning. I would like if we got that meeting on the books to ask what the planning board is thinking, to ask what are our ways forward before the both of you are able, if you're able to go to HLC, to get some information about the meetings that have been had that we could not share publicly. Like what has been said, we're sending a 10% plan. Is that just for review? Has the state asked for a 10% plan? What are we thinking in terms of the trolley? And what are the opinions on our town council? Where some folks are still, you know, I don't know if it's the board or the community, we're all out there, we hear these things from people, you know, from our friends, constituents, citizens, about the trolley, subway or not. What does our town council think about this? I think we've kind of rehashed and gone over this a lot, but I'm not sure where we are together as a board in terms of thinking what do we bring to the community, whatever the communication is. Because if, let's say we're at 25%, we have no way around it. No matter what we put forward, the community is going to have to agree to it. Nobody wants to be in another referendum. So I'm worried about our process and the communication between both of those boards and putting that together. And then the other side of what do we do with our zoning and our changes, and what are the options we have if we put forth a 25% or a 10% plan? Other communities have had it forward and they've been able to change their zoning over time. Some communities said, oh, we didn't expect. We've seen some blowback, some negative outcomes we didn't expect, and we're able to take that back off the table. I don't feel that any of these things are completely written in stone, whether 25 or 10. And I think that communication piece is also lacking around what this all means for us in Milton. What's our net new builds? You know, I look at our 25 and the 10 and what we have in front of us now, and the 10% really overburdens a certain section of Milton. And I don't think that's a section of Milton I'm okay with putting 750 new units in or 900 new units because it's most convenient, right? So I think we have a long conversation that has to be had that we just haven't had in the last 3 years. So, you know, before we're going to the state, I think us as a town, that we need to sort of, you know, tighten up our own arguments, our own sort of misgivings about what this all means, and which gives us a better standing before we're at the table with the state to say what we're hesitant with and where our issues are, instead of it sort of being very ad hoc and just at a moment, someone has a call, someone doesn't, we come back with not enough information. And truly, if you're in the town and you voted for this, for or against this 2 years ago, do you have any more additional information than 2 years ago in that vote, right? Have we provided you with anything as these boards? You know, we all kind of feel a little stuck at this point.
I mean, I agree with Mr. Daly on this. It's just coming down to the end of all of this. It's just feeling very chaotic. You know, and I agree that there are changes in some of the plans that folks probably haven't seen. And again, there's this confusion of whether we're eligible to be 10% or whatever. That it's confusing, and I think we should be able. It would be nice if we could get some more control and alignment among all these pieces, and make sure people understand what is in here.
I just want to.
And I think it's you know, I think it's, you know, the planning board, I know they do a lot of work to put these things together, but it's just been a very chaotic process, and you know, the confusion around where we're actually headed with it is to me disappointing.
Go ahead, Mr. Milton.
No, I just wanted to a couple of specific questions. To your point, in terms of can it be changed? Yeah, I mean, if the town meeting voted on something in June, there could be amendments and changes to it in the fall. So it certainly could be a living overlay that gets tweaked and adjusted as, you know, we see responses, we see the development community's response, or any other factors. And I would just tend to agree in terms of the overall approach here has been so focused on trying to come up with districts that might limit impacts, that it has been approached more as technocratic kind of approach in terms of where is a district and where can we limit the number of units and structure it to, you know, affect some neighborhoods but not other neighborhoods. So I think that's been, you know, in terms of a planning driven or approach versus a more technocratic approach, it's probably certainly a place where the whole process could be improved. And, you know, happy to coordinate in terms of if a joint meeting is something that would be helpful. I think it'd be, you know, prudent to do that and sooner rather than later as well. I think the other curveball that we have, obviously, is in terms of what are we going to finalize for June. And I think right now we don't know. And the question is, do we try to have that joint meeting as soon as next week, or as soon as, I think, if that is something of interest, I think kind of working through that kind of game plan would be helpful, so that we have clarity, A, from the planning board on what articles are truly being submitted, and B, the boards can converse and make a game plan together.
You have thoughts about this?
One of my discoveries in my freshman year has been just that and why I was pushing for the 2 school committee, 2 select board, 2 warrant committee, because nobody's talking to each other.
Right.
Yeah.
And in these
Yep.
critical issues, it's so
Yep.
important. We went to some of the finance committee meetings, and you came, and we could answer it right
Right.
there, right then and there. It's. I agree. It's
Yep.
especially an issue this big.
Right.
Yeah. I think everybody's making really excellent points. In terms of the timing, so I think Mr. Daly's point about also having public hearing is really important as well, because I don't think the public has had a real opportunity to look at. I mean, obviously we haven't even seen the 25% plan yet, so nobody's really had an opportunity to consider it. I am very worried about, and in fact, I would probably encourage this board to think twice about having a town meeting in June if the only plan that we have is a 10% plan, because I feel like that would set a, it would not, we would not be able to go to the state and say that we're coming to you in good faith to have a discussion if we're locked into just one plan. That said, I think having a joint meeting with the planning board to understand their process, and I think to get questions from them, both answered from them as well as their questions, that then we could sort of have an informed conversation with the state where we've got questions from the planning board, we've got our questions, we also maybe we can solicit public questions that could be answered, and maybe we could provide those questions in advance to HLC so that they could give us some, they could give some thought to it, and we could maybe have a document that says, okay, here are all the questions that we had, here are the answers. We can still have a conversation with HLC about finding out if there is an actual path to a negotiation, because my reading of the situation is that there isn't, but I would be happy to be proven wrong on that. And I think the only way to do that is through collective discussion and dialogue. So what do folks think about for timing?
I think the meeting between us and the planning board is as soon as possible.
One thing, I know this is radical, but that was mentioned is that we could put town meeting off a week or two. I know, it seems like
Yeah.
time is critical
Town
here.
meeting
And,
members aren't going to be happy about that.
well, I'm just, this is, how much time do we got a week,
Vacations
otherwise.
are being planned.
Yeah.
And I
We got a
will-
week.
I did just hear that the planning board did vote to not submit a 25% plan, but it submitted only the 10% plan that was previously worked on. So
How? Forgive my ignorance. What does that do for us in town meeting? If we vote for a 10% plan in town meeting, it's a vote to do what? Because the state has not indicated that they will accept a 10% plan. So what are we voting on?
I think to characterize what I have heard said in terms of an argument on that side is to demonstrate in good faith that Milton is willing and able to zone multifamily housing at a level that it feels is reflects its classification, and that further conversations can happen after that point. But to put a step forward to say this is what the town can do, that is one of the points I've heard. So I might not be doing that argument justice, but that I think is
had a conversation tonight.
a piece of
Yeah.
it.
And we don't know what the rationale was for approving it on Thursday and then taking it back tonight.
I don't know whether it was as folks got more awareness of where the units were located, the zoning was located, maybe there was pushback that was unexpected, or I can't speak to it. And maybe we'll hear more when you have an opportunity to either meet with them or watch the meeting back. But I can't. I would only be guessing.
I did sit in on the meeting, and the meeting they seemed, I know they voted on it, but it seemed mushy. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but other than that.
Well, sometimes we have to do things that we don't particularly enjoy
maybe
doing.
maybe
and
I don't
that
know.
was
It's
the
just,
sense that I had.
you know, my take on, I sat in on it.
So this, with that decision, and again, we're guessing because we're not watching the meeting. We're not there. To put only one plan in front of town meeting, I think handicaps us even more. Because
I
town
agree.
meeting is
Yeah.
another group of people elected by citizens of the town to have a conversation and a decision. There's possible that if we have put 25 or 10, both could have been voted down to town meeting, right? After it's shared, the planning board could have shared, they could have talked about their reservations, others could have shared, and maybe that doesn't pass. I think one of the things I'm most frustrated with is that we continue to only have these discussions in one board, and no one else gets a chance for input. We're in front of one board. There is a secret meeting that we do not hear anything about, where we do not get any actionable information, just intentions or here's what I think is possible. And the rest of the town, for 2 years, we've not been able to say anything. I don't know how we're handling our responsibility to the folks in the town around this, whether
Yeah.
they want to do it or they don't. We're taking it out of their hands.
And the other piece to the timing of the town meeting is that if the intention is to move forward with only the one article, for July 14th deadline to be back in compliance, presumably the town would still be non-compliant at that point, even if a 10% warrant article is approved, because the state HLC is looking for rapid transit compliance by July 14th. So if that's a factor in thinking about the town meeting date and timeline, there may not be a rush to June 16th necessarily if we're still going to be out of compliance on July 14th. If there's only one 10% plan being brought to the members at that time.
I mean, if we are, in fact, as was told to you in the meeting that you had with HLC recently, if we are in fact a rapid transit committee or community, and we turn around and approve and submit a 10% plan to the state, I worry that damages or could do any further damage to our negotiating position and ability to work with the state. Because one could say that submitting a 10% plan that we know is not compliant is not actually good faith.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Quaid.
From another negotiating thought and position, it could be a strong position that says this is what the town believes. I mean, they long ago offered to meet with us to talk about an adjacent community status, but have done zilch. So why extend that offer if nothing's to happen?
Who extended the offer?
They did, right? In the beginning, when we met with them, they offered to meet with us and talk about, that's how these meetings started, right?
I was not privy to that conversation, if that's the
Well,
case.
how did these meetings start?
Which meeting?
The meetings with HLC.
Rep Wells and Senator Driscoll had coordinated a meeting with HLC in February, I believe it was.
And his comment at this meeting was that they agreed to talk to us about adjacent community. You can look in these meetings, I know it happened. So that was, my understanding was the negotiation.
But then, you know, and presumably that happened before was it April 17th that
And it also happened,
regs were promulgated?
the date was prior to the final regs being promulgated and before the public comment deadline, because the comment made was, you know, we received your public comments, we're still in the comment period, so we won't, you know, we can't speak to that, and we'll be issuing final regulations soon.
But we're talking about a negotiation, and however it came about, the conversation about us becoming an adjacent community was they agreed to that, and we went and got nowhere.
I would say that conversation, we never got the full details of the conversation.
Never got one?
We never got the full details of the conversation. I think the most we got was that we could not share all the details, very similar to the one we had recently with Mr. Fahey and Chair Hall, where we can't get all of the details about what's said. And Mr. Milano was there as well. So I think without in writing of the state saying Milton is now a 10% adjacent community, all we have officially is that we are rapid transit. And we don't have anything on paper or publicly from the state. It's only been Milton representatives that have said that. So that is what worries me about what we've been told versus what has been actually said. I also think that in the 2 years that we've been working on this, I'm disappointed that we don't have multiple plans. That we don't have, in theory, multiple 10% plans or one or two 25% plans. We had an original one that went through town meeting, became the subject of the referendum. We don't have another one since then. And we don't have anything that we can put in front of the community to explain what all of this means. So even if we had a 25% tonight, we still wouldn't have time for public comment. We wouldn't have time for edits. We wouldn't have time for an explanation. I listened to the planning board meetings and watched those. And at the end, so many residents are confused as to what it means for their street, for their homes, for place and pace of the building. None of that has been shared. Like we have a responsibility for our neighbors, and then the second piece with the state about what we have. And we haven't put anything together.
So if I might just share a couple of thoughts, I don't want this board to be in the position where we're doing the planning board's job. I wish the planning board was doing the planning board's job. I agree with you, Mr. Daly, wholeheartedly that not having any 25% plan is not acceptable after the amount of tax dollars that were spent on a second round of consultants with UTL. Of course, the first round was funded by the state. To not have any plan, and I tend to agree with Ms. Haggerty strongly that going to the state with a 10% plan, like it or lump it, that's when my kids were in kindergarten, that's kind of how they negotiated with me. It's like, can we do this? No, well, that's what I want to do. Well, we still can't do it. We need to be able to go and show that we're able to work in good faith. Of course, we can zone for multifamily. We already have multifamily in this town. We need to be able to go and show them that we're actually willing to put in the work. But we're going to need to have some discussions about why did we just have to have an $8.5 million override because we don't have enough commercial development in town. Can we include more mandatory mixed use, which I was encouraged that the discussion with HLC indicated that there might be some flexibility on that. I think we could go and ask about, can we get a deadline pushed back and task the planning board in our open meeting with coming up with a workable 25% plan or two and having public comments on this. Because I think this is not how democracy works. It really isn't. And as much as I hear you, Mr. Cohane, in saying that this is how the town feels that we're 10%, that's how some parts of the town feel, not the whole town feels that way. And I think if we gave them both plans, we could say this is how some of the town feels, this is how some of the rest of the town feels. Is there a place that we can meet in the middle on that? Like that's how you go and negotiate. You don't go in with one plan. So my inclination is to not have the special town meeting in June unless we just want to do a couple of the articles that we need to do for fiscal year reasons, have a one day, go to the state and ask them hat in hand for more time, and then have this discussion with the planning board and require them to give us a 25% plan. It's not acceptable. I was very happy to put a 10% and a 25% plan in front of town meeting, have the discussion. I personally don't think the 10% plan is what we're going to end up with, but I was happy to do that. But to just have a 10% plan is not acting in good faith. The other thing I really would like to do is to submit a letter, to submit an action plan to the state that says that we are willing to do a 25% plan to go forward with an action plan. Well, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Milano, it doesn't say 25%, it says that we are willing to submit a compliant plan. And that will give us the time and the space to also talk to the state about what does compliancy look like. It doesn't tie us to the 25% number, it just ties us to being compliant, which I think everyone has a shared goal of being compliant with state law so that we can start getting some state funding in for our schools, for our council on aging, for our first responders, for everybody that's missing out on critical dollars. But I think to have a town meeting where we're going to spend time talking about a plan that we know the state as it is right now will just turn around and say no would be a poor use of time and resources. But those are my thoughts, and I'm happy to continue this discussion.
I think perhaps on the kind of to move to immediate next steps. So we could coordinate whether it's a joint meeting for next week or just a select board meeting for next week to take this conversation further. I guess that's question one. I know the planning board is meeting Thursday.
This Thursday or
next? I'm sorry, they're meeting next Thursday. This board typically meets Tuesdays. We could see if the planning board is available Tuesday, if there's an interest in having a joint meeting kind of right away. Or alternatively, if members are available, we can see if we can join their meeting. I just would note again with the timeline in terms of getting that warrant ready, sooner is better. So whether it's Monday of next week as well. But if that is the interest, then that is something I can try to coordinate tomorrow, if it's of interest to this board. As kind of the initial step, we could take the final action on the other articles and have a limited agenda to MBTA communities discussion and finalizing the town meeting warrant articles.
Could we take two tracks? As you suggested, reach out to the state, see if we can get more time. At the same time, trying to get these meetings together so that we can involve people. I don't know.
I think we're going to have to let the state know that we probably are going to need more time. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's part of a cover letter on an action plan to say we're going to be compliant. We're going to work towards compliancy. We want to have a discussion. And is there any way that they can give us a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months to fully go through this process? Okay. So I think that's a good idea, Mr. Cohen. I also think, I would say, the planning board wants to meet when they want to meet. I think we usually meet on Tuesdays. I think we should ask them to come to our Tuesday meeting next week. If everybody's able to come to the Tuesday next week.
I'll make it.
Is that a yes? Okay.
I'll make it.
If they can't, they owe it to the citizens of Milton to be here to answer some questions about their process.
Okay.
And I think in the meantime, I'd like to make a motion to authorize Mr. Milano to prepare the action plan letter and according to this discussion, include a cover letter that gives the specificity of our timeline and our hope to sit down with HLC in an informed way, in the next month, so that we can at least have this meeting with the planning board first to discuss where we are. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah.
Does anybody want to
second it?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I would have seconded.
All right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that's a unanimous decision.
Can I ask just
Yeah.
just clarification for myself? So where do we stand on this town meeting was put together specifically for us to do in MBTA communities, right?
Yes.
What are our options here, or just is that something we should just wait?
No,
on
I think that's
until
a
we
good.
have
That's a
the
good
meeting?
question.
Right.
Mr. Milton.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have right now is a 25% plan with the zoning parameters, draft zoning that were done, maps, district parameters such as height and density levels and floor area ratios.
Yeah.
That were prepared by UTIL at the direction of the planning board with zoning language that I worked on with staff using the information prepared by UTIL. So theoretically, there is a prepared warrant article based on the direction for the planning board's meeting on May 8th that UTL finalized late this afternoon, this evening really. So there is an article that exists kind of in the ether in a way that reflects the work the planning board's done, that reflects the 2023 warrant article language with tweaks to revise to reflect kind of the current iterations. It would need to be, for it to get to town meeting, it needs to be submitted by the select board, by the planning board, citizens petition. Those are the ways it gets to town meeting. Otherwise, what we have in front of us is an article submitted by the planning board, a single article at a 10% compliant action adjacent community level that is ready to go to town meeting. So if the interest is in having a compliant article in front of town meeting, somebody needs to take the work that's been done, submit a different article, or there's just nothing else ready. I guess sorry for a very long-winded answer, but it's either this thing that exists, or that has to get put on the warrant some way, planning board, select board, citizens action, or there needs to be an alternative option drafted and put together.
So that would, depending on our conversations we have after, because us not knowing the planning board's rationale, we can't say. But that could potentially put us in a situation where the planning board has a 10% plan and the select board or citizens, or whoever's put it up, has a 25% plan, and we're presenting both at town meeting. But the planning board would not be doing the comments on the 25%. They'd only be doing comments on the 10.
The planning board presumably would not support the 25%, but that would be reading into what they're actually doing in the future.
Even though it would be
based on
it'd be their language and their plan.
It would reflect where things stand as of today that UTL produced at their direction.
Right. And it would look bad for all of us in all the boards for that to be the situation.
I totally agree.
Okay.
And that is essentially how we got to the 2023 article. Is the select board wasn't doing planning. It just kind of said at some point, all right, Tim Zerwinski, whatever you have now, we're just going to use that. And that's why it was submitted by the select board in that instance. And again, it wasn't kind of a select board led effort. It was more just saying, take what you have and let's go with it from now. And I do just want to comment in terms of, the planning outreach and the planning process here is we have been working at a level below because we don't have a planning director right now, and that partially because of decisions I've made in terms of hiring and not having the applicant field that we think is right for Milton, and then holding off on hiring because of the override related issues. So I do at least want to acknowledge that the staff support to the planning board is more limited than it typically was. Tim took head on a lot of the public outreach that happened around the 23 article. It was more him than the planning board in that case. So they are working at a little bit of a deficit, and I think that's important to acknowledge as well. And we could take a more hands-on approach, but I've kind of taken a step back from that. But we can certainly try to add more if necessary.
I appreciate your taking some responsibility for that. I want to state, I think, I know that I am of the belief that one of the reasons we are unable to secure the sort of person that we would like to have, like Tim Zerwinski, who was fantastic, is because of the way and manner in which town employees have been treated by the planning board, which I think has been very unfair. Both employees as well as consultants have been treated unfairly, and if I were a prospective job, if I was looking at that as a prospective job and I watched one of those meetings, I wouldn't put my CV in there. So I would like to call on the planning board publicly to please put together a 25% plan that we can vote on so that we can have a town meeting, that we can negotiate with the state in good faith. And please, I think we're trying to model on this board, and I think that you can see that from John's position here, my position. We have to be able to work together on this, and holding our breath and demanding that the state do things is not going to get us anywhere. It's just going to continue to drive us down this path. Don't get your information off of Facebook. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. Really learn about what's at stake here, because we're in a pickle as a town, and it's not going to go away if we don't negotiate in good faith with the Commonwealth. Any further thoughts on this one?
No, I think what's said needed to be said.
Okay.
I'm agreeing.
All right. So there's no other action for us required other than this will obviously be an agenda item for us next week.
Yeah.
So moving on, Town Council RFQ review process and timeline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have a request for qualifications out publicly now for Town Council services. This covers 2 scopes of service: Town Council, which is general municipal services that Peter Mello provides presently for Murphy, Hesse, and Toomey Lane, who you all know. The other service is Labor Council, which is primarily human resources, labor relations work. We've requested qualifications for both scopes. We've not specified that it needs to be separate firms that will be providing the services. Right now, Murphy, Hesse, Toomey Lane provides both Town Council and Labor Council. Andy Waugh is the lead for Labor Council. Proposals or qualifications are due May 21st. As we've sketched out kind of the game plan when we talked as a board about doing this, it was with an eye towards a July 1 start date or continue date if MHTL continues in the role. So we would be looking for interviews by the select board of Town Council finalists for a date in June. So I think we could do that one of 2 ways. We could find a Tuesday evening or another evening and carve out a few hours. I'd expect at least 3 firms and representatives to be interviewed. Alternatively, we could find a work day and host a day meeting, a working meeting, and have MATV record it, and we could broadcast it live, but it could be a daytime meeting. So curious in terms of feedback on that. And what I would suggest is, depending on how many applicants we get, maybe town staff, if there are like a number of applicants, we would whittle down a short list and bring the short list to this group in order to recommend which firms would be interviewed. So that, I think, would be the game plan, is see how many applications we get. I don't think this group needs to interview 6 different firms, and we can present 3, roughly 3, I think, ideally. But we would want to find a date and a time that works for this board in terms of interviews.
Then we should probably try.
Oh, sorry.
We should probably try to early June, because they're due May 21st. We got to hire them 7/1 to give us a little time to
Correct.
digest.
My question was, so the question period ended last week. How robust was that? As a indicator of potential interest and the potential number of firms that we could end up seeing come in. How did the question period go?
We didn't receive any.
Okay.
But I think, so procurement of Labor Council or Town Council is exempt from procurement law, so there's not a very regimented request for proposals process that we have to follow, unlike some of our other procurements. So we've laid out a pretty low-key kind of request, give us your qualifications, tell us who your key personnel are, tell us what your approach is, rather than going too deep into the weeds on, certain categories. So I didn't expect a lot of questions, because the RFQ is pretty straightforward.
So are you also saying that not many firms are used to responding in this type of format?
I think you'll find more that the field is limited.
Yeah, okay.
So there are a few firms that provide these services, MHTL obviously being one.
Yeah.
KP Law has the lion's share of cities and towns in kind of Eastern Mass. That's another firm. Mead, Talem and Costa is a firm that has a number of communities, Harrington, Heap. There are other firms that focus on Metro West and western part of Massachusetts. So I would say 5 have expressed interest.
Okay.
And so I think we would see applications from maybe 5. And then
Okay.
Labor Council, some of those firms have Labor Council within them. There are a couple other firms that provide Labor Council services and only focus on Labor Council. So it might be a little bit of a different pot, or a larger pool, really, if some of the firms that provide both apply for both. And then we get some Labor Council only firms that apply for that side of the work.
Would we contemplate, if we had a firm apply for, or like potentially splitting? So if a firm had both capabilities, responded with responded with a proposal for both capabilities, but say if we liked another firm's labor practice or labor proposal and they only submitted a labor proposal, would we potentially consider splitting?
Yes, and that we called that out specifically in the
Okay.
RFQ document to say that
I missed it.
while we are soliciting both and
Yeah.
firms are welcome to apply for both,
Okay.
the town is not committed to only hiring one firm or committed to having
Okay.
two separate firms. So I think we've left all options open
Okay.
depending on how the discussions go and how the applicants
Okay. That gives
And
us
the
a lot
board.
of options.
correct.
Other questions? I think from a timing perspective, I agree with Mr. Cohen. I think early June would make sense. I also have a feeling that we don't necessarily know what our Junes look like at the moment. And
Yeah.
so we may want to revisit the looking for a date, maybe at our
The 27th.
the 27th meeting,
Sure. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
I just want, and that's helpful, and just to put on your radars and to be thinking about whether an evening meeting or if there's 4 hours on a Friday people can carve out, we could try to do it that way as well, or another weekday really.
That sounds good. And I think having town staff whittle it down a little bit too would be helpful if we do have a huge list of folks. Anything else on this?
And not for me, no.
Thank you. Mr. Milano, discussion approval towns of Randolph and Milton Veterans Service District Agreement.
Yes, so in your packet is an updated agreement between Milton and Randolph for veteran services. The towns have provided a joint veteran service officer for more than 20 years, I believe. And along the way, the agreement has been misplaced, lost, folks have lost track of it. So we're supposed to renew it on a regular basis. That renewal hasn't been happening. So between Brian Howard and myself, and then his assistant town manager, Monica Lamboy, and assistant town administrator, Nick Connors, I almost said my own name there, we worked to get together an agreement that reflects how the district has been working. So in terms of cost would be reflected the same. 60% of the cost is borne by Randolph, 40% of the cost is borne by Milton. The individual works 3 days in Randolph, 2 days in Milton, available to both communities, 5 days a week, expected to participate in all the necessary events in both communities. In the way they're kind of staggered, it works out that way that that is possible. So the agreement, again, reflects the current operating status, the current operating relationship, and we're seeking to have that approved by our town, and then the town of Randolph Town Council will also take it up in May. In terms of veterans agent, I was in Randolph all day Tuesday last week with town manager Brian Howard conducting final round interviews, and we're moving to reference checks. So hope to have an announcement to share soon on a replacement veteran service officer.
Thank you. And I know many of us worked very closely with Mr. Cook, who has retired. And I know that there was some discussion about having, is there a possibility of doing a part-time position just in Milton? And I think you've explained both previously and just now how we share this position with Randolph. So it's not something that we would do as sort of independently as a part-time, but rather split so someone has a full-time job.
And the state law and state regs require that towns have a full-time veterans agent if they're not part of a district. So if the town were to leave the district, we would be required to hire a full-time veterans agent. That's why a lot of these districts exist, because towns find it helpful to regionalize. And I'll just add to, we've been working more closely with Randolph as of late. We did apply jointly for an energy manager grant through Mass Save, which we were awarded. So we will have another, joint individual and energy manager that we'll be posting for shortly. That will be another shared regional effort between our towns, and hopefully that, regionalization opportunities will continue for us.
Any other questions? Hopefully it'd be nice to have them in place by Memorial Day.
So I will need an approval on that one.
So I will, does anybody like to read the motion there? Here.
Move to approve the Veteran Service District Agreement for the towns of Randolph and Milton.
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Milano.
Thank you.
So I might, given that we're already at 9 o'clock, let's maybe postpone our discussion of the select board retreat date, because again, I think our June's calendars are a little in flux. We may have more time, we may have less time, but let's postpone that. And we did move Article 12 up earlier. We have the application to use the town green and Baron Hugo gazebo. Anybody, I'd take a motion on this one.
Motion to approve the application to use the town green and Baron Hugo gazebo for the Flag Day celebration.
For Genevieve.
For
Nave.
Genevieve Nave. Sorry.
Yeah. For, on which date?
On Saturday, June 14th, 2025, from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. You guys will get the hang of those very, very quickly. Town administrators report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, welcome to Mr. Daly and Ms. Haggerty. We've had the opportunity to spend some time together, but that turnaround between the town election and town meeting crams us in. So welcome aboard, and obviously our office and staff are here to assist in the goals you wish to accomplish over the next few years. And I would also like to thank Aaron and Roxanne for their service. It's, in this world, you expect the bosses to change, but to be sitting here with only one left who appointed me is kind of, it's a strange world. So Roxanne and Aaron were here, since I started. Got to spend a lot of time together. So I really appreciate our partnership and the work that we did together. And I know we'll be seeing them around, which makes it not too challenging, but I just wanted to thank them personally. Town meeting, town election is obviously a whirlwind. So between the IT staff, town clerk staff, Lynn in our office, Nick Connors, warrant committee, the work that they put in, we appreciate everything that they do. It's a lot of hours and a lot of time away from families, so we recognize that, and thanks everybody for the work. And luckily it was only a 2-night town meeting, but we'll probably be back in June for a night or two. So thanks again to everybody who makes those town meetings work. And then, obviously, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And I've never given my mother-in-law a shout out, even though she's watching my kids every Tuesday night with my wife. So Mary, happy Mother's Day. So, Milton resident, so I feel like I had to give her one at some point in my career here.
Absolutely.
That's it from me for this evening.
Okay. Chair's report. I don't have too much. I don't think that we have had an open meeting since the high school production of Grease, which was fabulous. I think they sold out every show. So kudos to the high school drama department and all of the kids and adults and parents that make those amazing shows possible. I want to make sure that we extend a congratulations here to Ms. Dillon, who is our first female town moderator. So this is really a lot of firsts happening in Milton right now, which is fantastic. And I don't know that the warrant committee got a very formal thank you from the select board. It was a quick town meeting, so I did want to thank them for their thoughtful service. And I will say Tom Caldwell, I've known for our two kids have been friends since first grade. So it's always lovely to spend time with him in a non-looking after the children fashion. I think he did a great job as chair of the warrant committee. And the final thing I'd like to offer from the chair here is my sincere commitment to really helping to improve the tone, the dialogue, the community feeling in Milton. I think that there are some really tough times happening right now for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And I think we owe it to ourselves, to the town, to work cooperatively, but to work and to make sure that we're leaving Milton a better place than the way that we found it, the way that I was taught when I camped with my mom and dad as a little kid. I think that's a great way to live your life. And so my goal is that hopefully in my year in this chair, Milton will be a slightly better place than it is today. Not to say that it's not a great place right now. But I also open the floor to anybody else if they have upcoming events or anything. I guess we'll meet before the Memorial Day
Correct.
event. Anything else that folks need to be aware of in town? Okay. Future meeting dates. So we said now next Tuesday, which is the 20th. Am I doing
Next
the math
Tuesday
right?
would be a conflict for me.
That would be a conflict?
Yeah, I'll be flying back that night from the West Coast.
Okay.
So
So one thing that was
So I-
discussed also was the 22nd. I think you said the planning board has a meeting.
Yeah,
scheduled on
I
the
just don't
22nd.
know if they have like site plan stuff already scheduled for that evening. I can, is Wednesday night available the 21st or is the 22nd preferable? We could also try to meet at 6 if necessary on the 22nd. So if
I could do either the 21st or the 22nd.
Same here.
I think, Mr. Milano, why don't you check with the planning board to see what would work for them?
Okay.
And then let us know. But if the 21st and 22nd both work,
Okay.
then we'll be flexible that way.
if the 20th is the only day, I would have to come in hybrid. I don't know how manageable that is, but if you
You'd have to be
any-
remote?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
for this conversation, I think
Yeah,
if-
let's shoot
in
for the
person is much
21st or
better.
22nd.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. And then we've got the 27th also. And I will add here that we sort of lit on the second and fourth Tuesdays because they tended to work for everybody. And so if these dates for now look fine, great. But if Tuesday nights are problematic for folks for any particular reason and we want to sort of rethink them, I think we should have that conversation with Mr. Wells. But I just want to leave it out there that this was it was engineered around like my calendar, Aaron's law classes, and like Richard had a conflict on the first Tuesday. So there were a couple of things that were out there. But so if you know there's going to be sort of an existing conflict, to let us know, and then we can think about, do we want to start having these at a different date, because we're not bound by law to have them on the second and fourth Tuesdays. That's just kind of how it's set up. So then we also have the June 10th, and as of now, we have a special town meeting June 16th, 17th, and 18th. Future agenda items. I think, Mr. Milano, we said that we'll need to meet as the Governor Stoughton trustees.
Correct.
I don't know that the next Wednesday meeting would be the time to do that, but maybe
27th, perhaps.
the 27th. I think it would be great too if we were meeting, maybe that we could, I guess the Governor Stoughton trustees have to ask the committee to convene, so we can't do that here. But is that right?
Yes, they're meeting on Thursday night, the review committee.
Okay. Do we want to see if they might be available to come in and report to us if we're
Sure.
meeting at that time too?
Okay, I can do that.
Since their term's almost up. Any other future agenda items for folks?
One thing I would like to add, I don't know if this goes on the agenda just for future discussion, is do we currently have a scheduled for departmental meetings with the select board, where we're having either DPW or others coming in to sort of give a report, whether it's quarterly or monthly, about what's happening with different departments in the town?
We have not. We can certainly make that something that we can set up with some of the bigger departments is DPW of interest to get things rolling and maybe in June.
Yeah, I think all of them, just so
Yeah.
we, for us and also for the town to
Sure.
know, each of the departments and what they're facing or what they need.
Yeah, maybe you could drop a schedule for us, Mr. Milano, of like what that might look like.
Try to rotate folks in.
Yeah, and rotating it around. And thank you, Mr. Daly, because one of the other things that I'd like to encourage us to do over the next year is we went through this whole process of appointing folks to committees. I'm hoping that committees will report back to select board, because I think some of the committees we hear from pretty regularly, others we don't. I'm not saying that every week we have to have like every committee report, but I think in a similar vein of having some sort of rotating, or if there's some special decision that's been made, to have those committees report out.
Okay.
So maybe we can think about if there's a committee that needs to report. That might be too fast to have somebody report in the next 2 weeks. Any other agenda items?
And just so if there is something you'd like on the agenda, we try to prep it and get a draft in front of the chair and vice chair by Thursday, distribute the draft to the full board by Thursday midday of the week before meeting. And then we would post the agenda by 11 on Fridays, sometimes earlier, if I'm not too late on doing that. So that's generally the timeline. But if there are agenda items that you would like to be considered, you can ping me, you can ping Ben, however you, Mr. Zoll, excuse me.
That's
however you'd
totally
like to
fine.
do it.
It's going to take me a while
but
too.
I have a running tally of things that are coming up for the next week, future things. So if there are items you want me to throw on that list for discussion, just let me know, and we'll make sure to do that.
Are there like criteria that we're looking for like what's a good agenda item?
Nope.
Okay.
No, there's no sniff test.
Cool.
And
If you think it's important and that this board should discuss it, then we will
Okay.
put it on the agenda. I'm not, unless there's like a real time crunch, and we might
Yeah.
ask you to, and there's, it's not
Like
an urgent
bump
thing, we
it,
might
yeah.
ask you to bump it, but
Yeah.
I want everybody to feel like they have the ability to bring items forward. And that might also happen from your committees
Sure.
too. Sometimes your committees will say, can you tell the select board or ask the select board X? And so,
Okay. One item that, I think you're probably going to pull this forward anyway, but the discussion about, the joint finance committee composition would be for next time.
Yeah, I think I don't expect that we couldn't have a conversation about that on the 27th.
Okay.
I think that is ample time, and then we'll be able to check in with everybody and come in with some kind of a proposal and for reactions to and conversation around.
And the finance committee now could decide to meet before that
is
as
true,
well.
Too. That's right.
You guys can have a meeting, and and discuss it there, and then come back to this and tell us what you think as the finance committee. So you've got the power.
Can we invite other people to our finance committee?
It's an open meeting, so
It's an
anybody
okay.
can go. You can, Mr. Milano can
Coordinate and
can help you with that.
Great.
get a guest list.
And are we doing?
I was just going to say, I think with Mr. Wells not here, I think we can defer 19 and we'll include that on the 27th. There's nothing time sensitive
Okay.
at this moment on these items.
So I will take a motion, Mr. Cohen, if you'd like to make it.
I'll motion to adjourn.
I have a second.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everybody. This concludes our meeting. Thanks for joining.